What's the weirdest or craziest conspiracy theory you have heard of? Story 1. That owning chickens is the gateway drug to believing conspiracy theory. It's a slippery slope of, let's move away from other people, and then, oh, we're zoned for chickens, let's be self-sustaining. Both of those things are good. But the bad comes in when people rationalize why they should be self-sustaining. If you land on the good side, it's about planet sustainability, hard work, etc. If you land on the bad side, it's that flu shots are going to kill everyone. So we need chickens to survive. I didn't expect chickens to be the top answer here. I was going to comment that though it's not quite a conspiracy theory, but for some reason my dad believes that the shape of a chicken egg will tell you which gender the chick will be. I have no idea where he got that from, if someone told him that or what. But I've owned and raised chickens enough to know that's total B, and he still brings it up even after I said to him, that's not how it is. Story 2. Truck driver that delivered my flooring gave me this gem. The push for green lawns in the US is by Big Pharma. The Cliff Notes version is that to get green grass, you need pesticides. Pesticides cause cancer. Cancer is good business for drug companies. It was like a 20-minute long rant to get to that conclusion, and it was an adventure. Now, I don't believe that they pushed for lawns or other cancer causing materialistic things, but I do believe that they, meaning big corporations and governing bodies, don't care about people getting cancer as it is good for business. Sometimes they are forced to put restrictions in place, probably because it was starting to affect the profits or image of their business or the government. But the pesticides companies probably have no ties to healthcare. Story 3. Conspiracy 58. Basically, a conspiracy that the World Cup from 1958 never happened in Sweden, as it was broadcast and it was a CIA psyop. The conspiracy is documented in a movie Conspiracy 58, which makes a very compelling case, until at the every end of the credits, where it claims to be a work of fiction, the text only in Swedish. People legitimately believe this theory now. It's literally about historical revisionism, especially Holocaust denial. The point of the whole thing is showing that with the right tone of voice and enough crap, you can convince anyone that history was different. They present the movie straight face, and then at the end, in Swedish, it basically says, "You're so easy to fool." Story 4. Prince or King Charles is a prolific prank caller and goes by the pseudonym Frank Garrett when making these crude calls. He calls people around the world and cusses them out using a southern drawl. There's tons of these calls people have recorded and posted on YouTube. If you ever receive a call from a Frank Garrett, who makes no sense, and repeatedly cusses you out, there's a good chance it is in fact Prince and King Charles. The name Frank Garrett has nothing to do with Johnny Frank Garrett. If you have a look at this video from a news piece about the Frank Garrett Center, the comments are nonsensical and all from fans of Charles prank calls talking in his famous quotes. The rabbit hole on this goes very deep. On the surface, there has been a cover story made. It's a recording. We believe Charles himself has made recordings of his voice as well when he calls to muddle the truth from fiction. I was part of a prank calling forum that literally got shut down overnight after video evidence of Charles calling was captured. It sounds crazy, but it's true, and the royal family are trying to cover this up. Story 5. The USS Philadelphia experiment and the U.S. Army soldier who claimed he was in an interdimensional waiting room as a greeter for eternity until he was suddenly transported back onto the ship. People claimed it was a cloaking device gone wrong and left Mina bodies trapped within the steel of the boat upon reentry. I never looked into it, but read about it in a book that had the name like, "Nothing in this book is true, but it's exactly the way things are," or something similar. I always thought it was the wildest conspiracy theory ever when I was a stone teenager reading it. Reading that crap on dial-up as a 13 creeped me out and made me love conspiracies. I still do, but only the weird crap. Not these dumb political conspiracies the conspiracy guys currently freak out about. Give me alien, cryptid, crop circles, and supernatural conspiracies all day. I'm like an old school fan of conspiracy theories. So I like the entertaining, goofy crap. Every time the Hadron Collider is successful, we alter the collective timeline of events without altering our perception of the past. Sweet, sweet Mandela effect. You have a 45-minute YouTube video you want to show me of tangible proof that Harambe was a canon event, hurling humanity into a new dark age? Fire it up, buddy. I'll get the bong loaded up. But if you're going to show me pictures of Podesta and Chester Bennington side by side and rant about pizza, I'm probably going to be bored. Story 6. There's a whole podcast with hundreds of episodes dedicated to this subject. worth a listen. One of the wildest ones is that Charlemagne's grandson moved the calendar forward for 300 years, and thus the Dark Ages never happened. I ran into a similar phantom time thing where someone was claiming that a bunch of natural disasters that occurred near the turn of the 20th century were to eliminate evidence of what the actual year was, and that we're actually currently in the 1000s. I believe the idea is that the Roman Empire never fell, and we basically went straight to the Enlightenment. The person's piece of evidence was the end of an AI colorized remaster of the short film A Trip Down Market Street, which basically just shows what a street in San Francisco looked like from the perspective of someone riding a cable car. It's notable because it was shot days before the 1906 earthquake. It ends with the camera looking at a plaque to a building that says the building was erected in 1896. However, the AI screws up and pretty much erases the one from 1896. The obvious conclusion to the conspiracy theorist is that the 1906 earthquake was a cover to erase evidence of the actual year. Story 7. Mass shooting victims being crisis actors. A majority of my church I grew up in was shot up with a lot of people I cared about and loved in it, many who are dead now. The amount of brain-damaged idiots that are willing to openly discuss your dead friend being a crisis actor was infuriating and caused me to abandon so many relationships with men who genuinely fell for some of the crap that was spread, or even to justify why someone might think that. Oh, you're just stupid and need to get help immediately because something is wrong with you to even consider that such a thing would be plausible on such a massive scale. The crap Alex Jones put on Sandy Hook families and others through makes me cringe. I couldn't get through seeing that trial on TV. People can be so cruel and crappy and stupid sometimes. It's literally the craziest crap that I still have a hard time unpacking. Story 8. COVID was not a virus. It was actually the result of the Catholic Church lacing the world's water supply with king cobra venom in order to genetically transform the world's populace into snake-human-demon hybrids, thus preventing them from going to heaven. This was all because the scientific name of the king cobra and a piece of a bishop's mitre contained the word corona. The person who presented this theory apparently had no idea that corona just means crown in Latin. He was presumably too busy being contacted by God through fortune cookies he got from a Chinese restaurant. Story 9. My friend and his dad are big conspiracy theorists. They listened to Alex Jones every day and believed him too. A couple of years ago, it was on the news that some Navy SEALs and the PD SWAT were going to do a joint training exercise. Those two were convinced that it was all a ruse and that they were going to try and take over the city. So that day, they didn't open their business and stayed home and armed themselves with every weapon they had and waited for an attack. Story 10. The court reporter shortage fraud, where a group of companies used a sham nonprofit to push a worker shortage and mislead consumers or job seekers for profit. The Free Press then uncritically republished the corporate narrative of an impossible stenographer shortage, de facto backing the conspirators. And the great thing is, people can Google this. The companies can't sue, because a lawsuit would give the allegations wings. One of the main bloggers on this topic has stated repeatedly that the statute of limitations for defamation came and went on the things he published, and that no action was taken. So any blogger or citizen journalist that comes after is going to be able to write about it with much less pressure. Story 11. That all conspiracies are misinformation. Clearly not all, but the list of documented conspiracy theories is literally tens of thousands of individual theories spanning the last 100 years or so, with over 90 debunked. That's not to say 10% are true. It's just that 10% aren't debunked. Some are in fact true, but it's like lottery odds damn near. Tell me a theory. Give me less than ample opportunity to research it, months at minimum, years more probably. Then put a gun to my head and ask me, is it true or false? I will say false 100% of the time, because reality is far more boring than undiagnosed schizophrenics would have you believe. The point is, choosing to take a position of, the man's out to get you, and believing millions of people manage to keep their traps shut for this long means you're just as much of a Kool-Aid drinker as the guy singing, government, oh government, you always know what's best. It's just a different flavor of Kool-Aid, and your mind is just as closed off. A good conspiracy theory targets a person who believes something without concrete proof to support it, at which point it's no different than cultism or religion. You believe it because you want to believe it. Story 12. that gravity is just a theory. I gave up after trying to explain the differences between theory and scientific theory and the observable effects of gravity, which he rejected. I then, as politely as possible, suggested that he test his arguments by leaping off a very tall building after he opted out of gravity, of course. He was also a flat earther, intelligent design believer, Christian fundamentalist, and, oh yes, a textbook misogynist. These people get confused with the theory of quantum mechanics, or whatever they call it now. I'm not up to date. It's the mathematical problem of trying to unify the forces we technically don't fully understand. Gravity most certainly exists. We just can't figure out a way of explaining it with numbers when things like electromagnetism come into play. Once again, my knowledge is not up to date, so I know that those ion colliders have been doing lots of work on this, if anyone wants to update the rest of us. Story 13. Joe Biden, Bill and Hillary Clinton, and President Obama were recently executed, at Gitmo no less, and replaced with lookalikes. Why? I have no freaking idea. That the government that they hate so much has been completely replaced by people who are on their side, and that they are not only going to forgive all debt, but that they are distributing med beds that will be on government installations and will cure any disease. These people are literally withholding medical treatments from themselves and from family members because they believe these med beds are going to be available by 18th of November. Oh, and all these people are also Trump supporters. People are nuts. Story 14. I know QAnon is just an amalgamation of 100 different conspiracy theories, but it's definitely the craziest IMO. Just the sheer amount of people that are diehard believers in it is the craziest part. I don't know how any rational human being can think Donald Trump is chosen by God to save anything. I have way too many family members that are still telling me that the hangings are coming. They 100% believe Nancy Pelosi and others are drinking baby blood. It makes my brain hurt. My dad keeps telling me about Bill Gates using vaccines to cull the population because the earth can only sustain a certain number of people. So he is trying to get it down to that. Also, that the military is basically planning a coup to overthrow Biden and his people to put their own people in, which is then going to throw the US in disarray, and the dollar is going to go to crap, and people are going to have to survive on their own and will be trading gold and silver. He is stockpiling supplies in his garage and has buckets of gold and silver. He keeps telling me to keep a supply of non perishables and be ready to grow my own food. Story 15. Conspiracy theories use it to be kind of silly and something to laugh at. I mean, the flat earth theory is quite possibly the dumbest thing anyone has ever come up with, because the debate about it was solved 500 years ago. But the explosion of the anti-vax attitude and movement is legitimately dangerous, in that people who choose to not protect their children are also putting other children and seniors with immunodeficiency problems as well. And the real crazy part is that a bunch of Orange County mothers are the ones who first got a hold of this, because a unscrupulous researcher said that vaccines lead to autism, which it doesn't and never has. And the researcher had to recant his findings, return the money he was paid for publishing the paper, and went to prison, but it caught hold. And now we are getting to dangerous levels of susceptibility for truly dangerous diseases. Story 16. Flat Earth? Nah, too boring. I have something better for you. Underwater dome Earth. Apparently, the whole Earth is not only flat, but actually rests on the bottom of an absolutely huge ocean, probably on a giant planet of sorts. The skies are just one huge geodesic dome that protects us from being crushed by immense pressure of water. It also has some weird crap stuff to imitate day and night cycle, heat things up, etc. If it rains, it is because the dome starts leaking. Huge ocean is freshwater for some reason then. Most importantly, why are we here? And they have an answer. The whole of our Earth is one big underwater mining colony by aliens, or whatever advanced species they are. They made it and put us in to dig up all the natural resources. Theorists kind of proof it by screwing around with mining industry statistics that show that millions tons of metals and oil apparently vanish, go nowhere, that is being handed over to our captors and overlords. Now, here comes the main point. When we are done, they just take off the dome and let the water fly in, drowning us all. Then they'll put the dome on another part of the ocean and inhabit it once again to mine for resources. The cycle will continue. Yeah, the Noah's Ark story is explained as a submarine evacuating future workforce for the next dome. The Green Movement is actually trying to slow down our eventual death. They fight to reduce resource depletion. We can provide our overlords with metals longer, We won't be flooded soon. Story 17. Most of these are very run-of-the-mill conspiracies, I have to say, but mud fossils are the real deal. Mud fossils is a theory that landscape formations, anything from roadside rock outcrops to continental scale landforms, aren't the result of geologic activity, but in fact, the remnants of ancient, gigantic beings like monsters, giants, and dragons. Quite often, they're biblical in nature, like the body of Leviathan forming South America or something, or the remains of giant beasts killed in the flood. Other times, they're less biblical and more random, like mountain ranges being the result of a giant who fell over. Pareidolia plays a huge role, or the western portion of North America being a giant pregnant goat sleeping underground, which I did not make up as an example. That's a real one I saw. From what I can tell, it's closely linked to flat earth belief, and there's huge overlap. Although I'm not sure most FE folks believe in MF, just the other way around. It's some of the most insane examples of people trying to make sense of the world while refusing point blank to trust anyone else's explanation. Mud fossil people are peak insanity without exaggeration. Story 18. The original inhabitants of New Zealand were white men who were also giants, and the proof is a leg bone some guy has in a cave on his property. And no, you cannot see it, but he says it's really big, and it's very clearly the bone of a Caucasian person. How can he tell? Mate, it's obvious. You can't tell the difference. I thought everybody knew white people had different femurs. No, wait, okay, I know that's tenuous. But did you know we found ancient Celtic stone circles that predate colonization? Of course, over time they fell apart, which is why all we have are individual stones that kind of stick up a bit, and most volcanologists agree are mostly ejecta from various eruptions in a supergeologically active country. Smack bang on the Ring of Fire. But look, mate, ancient Celts put them, and those coils were 9 feet tall, and they all got eaten by the Maori, including the bones, except this one single leg bone I have that no you cannot see. Weren't you listening? Look at these rocks, and that's why it's okay that the British seized land from the Maori, because it was originally white man's land, and they were just taking it back. An absolutely shocking number of people believe this. It's a whole thing, and I never hear about it in online spaces discussing conspiracy because, well, it's so specific to New Zealand. It doesn't travel well, but it's a fascinating look into the conspiratorial mind. Story 19. That my country, Hungary, is just a company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. That's it. My country is just a hoax. In its current state, it's actually better be one. But that's another topic. So, folks who believe in this carry printed documents, parts of the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, because that's the basis of the theory, with themselves to prove to the so called authorities that they can't do anything with them, because they aren't even legally authorities. Thus, some people think that even their mortgage is invalid. Also, they don't have to register their newborn children and don't have to vaccinate them. Story 20. So people believe anything that some random stranger says on the internet. They are that gullible and are pretty much the sheeple they proclaim everyone else is. The 9/11 conspiracy theories about the controlled demolition of the towers. What is easier? A huge demolition project done that would have taken months and done in secrecy, or just flying a 20-ton plane full of jet fuel into a building fuel of plastic and wood products, and the building, which isn't even designed to take a 20-ton impact, falls down. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel? How do you know? Did you look up the engineering specs of steel, or did you just listen to random people on the internet? So, not many people are familiar with how mass is affected by speed to create force, or the math of calculating force. So, how about a simple analogy? You know how bullets can go through a person? That bullet weighs just a tiny, tiny fraction of that plane. Just check the weight of the planes. They aren't 20 tons, but have a maximum takeoff weight of 395,000 pounds, so almost 200 tons. Story 20. The Baltimore Orioles cut the power to their stadium in order to postpone a game and preserve Cal Ripken Jr.'s consecutive games played streak because he had supposedly just caught his wife sleeping with Kevin Costner and was too traumatized to play. To add to the already existing levels of implausibility, the postponed game in question was in August 1990. Ripken had already broken Lou Gehrig's consecutive games played record 2 years prior. If the Orioles' goal was to ensure the record would be as untouchable as possible, they wouldn't have had to go to those lengths. Ripken's streak ended in 1998 at 2,632 games. No MLB player has played even 1,000 consecutive games since Miguel Tejada played 1,152 games in a row from June 2000 to June 2007. Story 22. This is actually my conspiracy theory. I'm not sure if anyone else has thought of it, but credits to anyone if they have ever thought about this. We are all simply from the imagination of an immortal man who went crazy. Long ago, an infinite time ago, there was a man who may or may not have lived with a civilization. Regardless, he somehow obtained immortality. Yes, immortality went exactly as people predicted it to. First, the man loved it. He took risks and did whatever he wanted, knowing everyone and everything would eventually disappear. Soon his home planet blows up, his sun blows up, and he is doomed to float in space forever. The immortal man slowly begins to go insane, creating fantasies in his head. With an infinite amount of time, he creates an infinite amount of possibilities. Infinite possibilities would mean every single thing that ever happened in existence in the history of time. The immortal man imagined every single person on Earth's personality and the infinite possibilities of how their life went. This is theoretically how the multiverse exists. Each possibility is simply another multiverse. Not only humans, the immortal man imagines an infinite amount of alien species, each with their own infinite species, with infinite personalities and thoughts. Everything in existence is truly just imagination. The Earth we are on is just one of infinite thoughts. You reading this is simply just another thought of the immortal man. Story 23. Heard at my last job that I was independently wealthy and didn't need to work. But the only reason I had a job was that I didn't trust my wife. I wanted to catch her doing whatever it is that she was purportedly doing, but I was always home. And though I was independently wealthy, I wasn't that independently wealthy, so I couldn't afford a private detective to follow my wife. So I got a job I hated at a dead cow factory, so I could pay a private eye to follow my wife while Lee was at work at the job. I only needed to pay the private eye to follow my wife while I worked. Again, the job I only needed because I had it.